Hey everybody, so today I'm going to tell you how to calculate your GPA in college, but to do that I have to first tell you how things are graded in college because it's slightly different than how it was in high school. So in college you can have two ways of grading things. When you take a class you can get a letter grade for it. And what I mean by letter grade is, you'd get something along the lines of an A plus, all the way down to an F. You'd actually get a letter grade, much like you did in high school. You can get A, B, C, D, and F. Another thing that also happens in college that didn't happen in high school as much is pass-fail. Some classes will be offered pass-fail, other times you might take a class for pass-fail. I want you to know that for a pass-fail class, you'd only either end up getting a pass or a fail, okay? Ideally, you always want to get a pass, but if you get a fail, that's usually a big red flag to a lot of schools. So if you really want to avoid getting fails in pass-fail classes, but the main point is this pass-fail has no impact on GPA. All right, so if you take a class for pass-fail, it has no impact on GPA. However, if you take a class for a letter grade, this is literally where your GPA will come from. All your classes that have a letter grade associated with them will have an impact on your GPA. And in college, your GPA is a pretty valuable thing you want to make sure you maintain. So let's make sure we understand how to calculate it. So first of all, much like in high school, each of your letter grades is worth a point. However, the big difference in college is that an A plus is not the same thing as an A minus. So when you get an A plus, you will end up getting 4 points. Okay? When you get an A, you will also end up getting 4 points. But now notice, an A minus, you actually end up getting 3.7 points, which is not the same thing as 4. In my high school, someone who got an A minus was the same as someone who got an A. In college, that's not the same anymore. An A minus gives you fewer points than does an A. And that's just how it is. A B plus is 3.3 points. A straight B is 3 points. A B minus is actually going to be 2.7 points. A C plus is going to be 2.3 points. A C is going to be 2 points. A C minus is 1.7 points. A D plus is 1.3 points. A D is 1 point. A D minus is 0.7 points. And an F is 0 points. If you fail a class, usually there's something going on that you probably didn't address. So you want to make sure that if there is something going on, you address it. But you really want to try not to fail a class because you'll end up like this guy right here who's really sad. Oh, that's bad. I didn't do a good job with his nose, but that's okay. Let's go down. So once you end up getting your points, right? Let's say you get an A, you know that you'd end up getting 4 points in the class, whereas if you get an A minus, you'd end up getting 3.7 points in the class. Well, now once you get those points, the other thing about college that's different is that each class has a certain number of units for it. You might be taking a chemistry class for 4 units. You might be taking a psychology class for 3 units. So each of those points that you get for a grade, you now have to convert into this thing called a unit point. All right, unit points are completely different, and they're completely, I'd say, independently used in college. It was not used in high school. So to find out your unit points, you actually take the point you got for your grade. Remember, if you get an A, you get 4 points, a B is 3 points, a C is 2 points, etc. But then you have to multiply it by the number of units that the class is worth. And that will give you the total number of unit points for that class. And I'm going to tell you why this is important in a bit, because this is an imperative aspect of the GPA. But let's do some examples. So let's say you get an A plus in a 4-unit class. For you to get that A plus, you would eventually end up getting 4 points. Because if you get an A plus, you get 4 points. But now remember, it's a 4-unit class. If it's a 4-unit class, that usually means it was a lot more work than a 3-unit class or a 2-unit class. So you want to weight it accordingly. So a 4-unit class should give you 4 units. So if you wanted to find the unit points associated with this, you'd have to multiply the two together. And for this class, you end up getting 16 unit points. Okay? Awesome. Now, let's say you get a B minus in a class. A B minus in a class, if you go back up to our previous page, a B minus is 2.7 points. So you have 2.7 points, and now you're going to do it in a 3-unit class. So what you end up getting for this one is that you'll end up getting 8.1. Wow, I did that in my head. I'm very lucky to remember basic multiplication. But basically for this one, you'd end up getting 8.1 unit points. All right? So you should get in the habit of figuring out what unit points you're getting for certain classes. But now that you know the unit points associated with certain classes, I want to get to the main deal of this video, which is GPA. How do you use your unit points to determine GPA? GPA is going to be determined by the total unit points you have, divided by the total number of units you're taking. All right, and there's a very, 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 very important distinction here. These total units are referring to total graded units. And what I mean by graded is they have to be letter graded all the way down to an F. All right, pass, no pass units are not included in this. So it's this total graded units. So to really get an understanding of how to calculate GPA, I decided to give you guys an example. So recall earlier that the GPA is determined by the total unit points divided by the total units, okay? So let's do this student right here. This student took Chem 1A, Psych 1, Math 1A, and Sociology 1. And this student got a B plus in Chem 1A, an A, we'll go down the list. But let's say the student got a B plus in Chem 1A. Remember, we want to calculate the total number of unit points associated with this. If we go back up to our chart, you may recall that a B plus is worth 3.3 points. Okay? And then we want to multiply it by that. We want to multiply that by 4 because remember the class is worth 4 units. And if we do that, we'll end up getting the fact that you'd end up getting 13.2 unit points out of this class. Right? Now let's do Psych 1. Psych 1 was 3 units. I'm going to erase that actually. Psych 1 was 3 units, but you ended up getting an A in the class. So that A, remember, that A is worth 4 points, and now you have to multiply it by the 3 units that the class is worth, which is now going to give you 12 unit points. Alright, now let's do Math 1A. Math 1A, you ended up no passing in that class. This is supposed to be a P, okay? I know it's not obvious, but that's a P. Let's say you passed that class because you were struggling. Maybe you passed it. Maybe you failed it because you were struggling with the class, or maybe you just didn't have enough time to devote to it, and you're like, you know what? I don't want to worry about getting a letter grade in this. But you ended up passing the class. Well, if you get a pass, this has no GPA impact. Okay, so you're going to completely disregard this class. For all we know, I have no idea what this means. Find out why there's aggression towards men. No, thank you. Okay, we're going to get rid of that. But anyway, this has no GPA impact. So whatever this Math 1A has, this is not going to impact our GPA at all. So no impact. Now let's move down. Let's say you took Sociology 1. That was 4 units, but you got an A minus, which is awesome. An A minus, if you recall, is 3.7 points. And the class itself is worth 4 units. So if we do the math here, let me do so. 3.7 times 4 is going to be 12 plus 2.8, which is 14.8. You'd end up getting 14.8 unit points. So now, if we add up the total number of unit points, it's going to be 13.2 plus 12 plus 14.8. Yeah? And if we actually do that, and I'm going to actually do that right now, you can do it on your own calculator as well. And I want to make sure I get this right. It's going to be equal to 40. Wow, that worked out really nicely. 40. That's 40 total unit points. And now if we measure the number of total graded units we had, remember we started with a 4-unit chem class, and then we had a 3-unit psych class. We're not going to include Math 1A's 4 units because we took it for pass, no pass, so we don't want to include it. And the last thing was Sociology, which is 4 units. So the total graded units we had was 4 plus 3, which is 11. Okay? So now what we're going to do is find out our GPA. And the GPA is going to be determined by the total unit points divided by the total number of units. And that's going to be, remember, what's our total number of unit points from the previous page? Let's go back. It's 40 unit points divided by 11 total units. So 40 divided by 11. which is 3.636. So that is your GPA. And you just calculated it on your own. Let's say that was your semester GPA. That's awesome. Now, if you ended up doing this for 4 more semesters, you'd go down the list and you'd keep going, and you'd basically average out all of the semesters, and you could come up with a cumulative GPA. One thing I do want to note here is there are some real life applications to this. All right, a lot of medical schools will look at this thing called your cumulative GPA. What does that mean? That is literally your GPA from start to end of college. So knowing how to calculate your own GPA really does help, because if you know your cumulative GPA and you know how to calculate it, you can actually make anticipatory calculations. What do I need in this final to get a certain GPA? What do I need in this final to get an A in this class? And once you decide all of that, you can see how that impacts your GPA. Another thing that med schools also look at is this thing called science/math GPA. So this is something you can't always plug into a calculator online. You would have to calculate this on your own, because the science/math GPA, the med schools will only look at literally your letter grade in science/math courses only. And that's important because this is very, very selective. All right, you can only use any science classes we took and any math classes you took to add into your GPA. And so this is something that, again, I was able to calculate this on my own because I knew how to do GPA stuff. I mean, you can always plug it into a calculator online, but knowing how to do this on your own is a really big tool and really valuable. So other than that, I really hope you found this helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to comment below, but subscribe if you like the video, and I'll see you on the next one.